product manager for Canvas and GoOpenNC, and this is our session for Link Not Found Accessibility in Canvas. I will admit some people here as they come in, and I'm going to get my slideshow pulled up here, and I'll drop the link in the chat that you are certainly welcome to take and use moving forward.
Hey, Corey, this is Donna. Would it be helpful for me to admit people?
Oh, yes. Hey, Donna, I didn't even see you were here. Yes, let me make you a co-host. That would be great.
I've seen the window pop up, so I think I should have access.
You got it. Okay. I didn't know if it was a thing I had to give you, but since you're internal, yep, you can. Thank you so much for being here, Donna, and I greatly appreciate that.
Of course.
All right. Well, let me share my screen here. All right. So like I said, this is our session that we're going to be talking about today, and I'm going to be jumping out of a few windows in Canvas, so I kind of wanted to do some things. And if you have your Canvas instance readily available, I would strongly suggest if you have that pulled up, I'm going to give you some opportunities to kind of play around with some things, ask questions. Please feel free to interrupt me as we go through. I want this to be the session that you need to get out of it. So just a few housekeeping things. If you can't hear me, throw it in the chat, get my attention. There is the bit.ly link I said earlier. If you have questions, please always feel free to reach out, and making sure that you're going back to the sched for the sessions that are continuing this afternoon. Just as a reminder, if any of your other presenters haven't gone through this, the way they've broken out the CEU schedule for today is either a 0.3 or 0.6 CEUs, and you'll receive those from the BCS team. Those will not come from us as presenters. They will come across, I believe, as general credits, but they're encouraging you to, however your district does that, to award those as DLCs. And on that note, and then there's the attendance piece. So you have to fill that out at the end of the day. Like I said, we don't issue those certificates as non-BCS staff. This is me. I am your product manager for Canvas and GoOpenNC for the Department of Public Instruction on the Digital Teaching and Learning team. And Donna Murray, who's also on this call with us, is one of our regional consultants. So I'm happy for her to be with her today. And she knows a lot about accessibility and will probably is way more adept than I am to talk about this conversation. So I may chime on her to ask a few questions or to engage in that conversation. But as we're talking about digital learning competencies, I think it's important to know and understand that teachers know how to use their tools appropriately, and that we are supporting and encouraging all students to be successful. And I think that's kind of our main lens that we're talking about today, is making sure that all of our students have the opportunity to be successful in their learning environment. So that's kind of where we are. And so the first thing that I want to talk about, as we have gone through the past 2 years, and really even before then, as digital teaching and learning was growing in K-12, what are some of the barriers that you've seen and you've experienced when it comes to online assignments and online engagements, and how have you overcome those barriers, or how are you still working through and around those challenges? So I'm encouraging you can come off mute, use the chat, but I would love to engage with you guys for what some of those barriers that you're currently experiencing or have experienced. Absolutely. Yep. That parent engagement and parent understanding, because especially obviously many of our parents haven't gone through an environment where there's a lot of ed tech tools. So how can we, make sure that we're not leaving them out of the conversation when we're talking about the platforms and setting those expectations? What are other things? Students' knowledge of the LMS. Yep, absolutely. So how can we make sure that here again, just like with our parents, that we're not making assumptions in their technical aptitude and understanding of how to navigate things. And, just because I design a course in a way and it makes sense to me because I'm the instructor, doesn't necessarily that means it's going to make sense or logical flow to my students and my parents. Oh, accessibility of resources, absolutely. Having, that absolutely not having access to internet and devices. Um, I think we've got a lot of temporary solutions in place with a lot of those ESSER and not E-rate, ESSER and CARES Act dollars that are coming into schools right now. So, but how can we, that's not sustainable. Those funds are going to dry up at some point. So, absolutely, and yeah, and even training for admin and resources and teachers. Mm-hmm. I will agree with you on that. It's been very interesting that there are some students who take digital assignments as less than um, physical assignments. I don't know if it's because there's something more tangible about them. That is interesting. That I've also witnessed that and experienced that. Yep, how to forgetting their platforms. So here again, how can we keep those reminders in front of them about how to use that? So thank you for engaging in that discussion. And those are some things that I'm going to put away in my mind to have at the end here if we can circle back to. So why does web content accessibility matter? So, here again, we're trying to support inclusive practices in everything that we do to make sure that content is available to the widest range possible of students. So making sure that as many students that we have and we serve, because we'd want to do the same thing in the physical classroom environment, we want to make sure that we're doing the same thing in the virtual or the blended classroom environment. And of course, there is a legal component to that, making sure that our students have equal access to materials and resources. So the first thing I want to talk about is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and I've linked their website here. They do a fantastic job of an acronym, which is called POUR, which I learned about through Donna. She gave us a great training as a DTL staff, and I wanted to incorporate it into this session as we're talking about it through the lens of Canvas. But it uses the acronym of POUR, which means perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And so each one of those kind of talk to the lens of having content accessible to learners. So can they see and hear the information? So is it perceivable by all of those students? Can they navigate the information independently so they don't require an adult's interaction or intervention in supporting them? Is it understandable? Can all learner types understand and perceive that content in its predictable design? So I'm consistent in my course design. And is it robust in that all of the technologies that are used for assistive reasons, those are all accessible, that content is able to be leveraged. So students who may have maybe colorblind, students who have a screen reader. I had a student one time that used a Braille interface and navigating that and setting that up for her on our district's network was a challenge of its own. But once we were able to accomplish that, we were able to get her the learning and the content that she needed because of that piece of software and that hardware that she had. So what does this kind of look like as we're talking about some tips that it looks into? And forgive my bit emoji there. I just, I couldn't not include it. So, if you're going to laugh at yourself, might as well have some fun while you're doing it. So what do these look like? And I'm not going to read all of these bullet points to you, but I personally like tangible examples. And so the website kind of talks about for POUR, what are those things look like? So, if it's perceivable, do we have descriptions on our text? Do we use alt text? And we're going to talk about how to do those things. Is it robust? Are you performing accessibility checks? And we're going to talk about what those tools are inside of Canvas that you can leverage to perform those things to make sure your content is robust as possible. So this kind of gets us into another framework that I like to talk about also, which is universal design for learning. Here again, I didn't create any of these frameworks. I wish I had, because then, I don't know, maybe I'd have a book deal or something. Maybe that'd be awesome. But universal design for learning is a great framework to talk about how do we leverage those same things. So how do we bring in the engagement, the representation, the actions and expressions into our instructional design? So POUR and UDL are great ways to talk about those frameworks and understanding. So this is the image of the framework, which I wanted to talk about, but I really wanted to go to the next slide, which is talking about what is it in a nutshell. So this really kind of, you can see how these two models really mesh well together. So in the multiple means of representation, giving students the same information through multiple different formats. So if I'm having them read an article, do I also have a video or a podcast or an audio file that gets that key information across to my students? Now, does it have to be the exact recording of all of those things? No, not necessarily, but you could have different representations there so that, like I said, that key information will be equally presentable to all students. Multiple means of action and expression. So what are the, this was what we're talking about, student choice and voice, giving them the opportunity to provide feedback and support for their different levels of understanding. So personalizing that learning, just like we would do in the physical classroom, how are we able to do that inside of the virtual environment or the blended environment? And then multiple means of engagement. Just because I'm I have a colleague who just loves to read, and they, are an avid reader and they love to read that text, and that's how they absorb all the information in the course content. I, however, on the other hand, I'm very much a visual learner. Show me a video, let's have a conversation about it. All of those things to spark my creativity and my understanding. So this kind of really gets to that, like I said, personalization and understanding those modalities of learning that best meet the needs of your students. So it's not just about accessibility for UDL, but those underlying principles can really reduce the barriers that students may have. So if you've heard of UDL and you've heard of the POUR model, those two frameworks obviously work very closely well together. I'm going to pause here and ask, any thoughts, comments that anyone has about either one of these frameworks that you've heard about before, like about them, or any of those other aspects or comments that you want to add to that. I'd open that floor to anybody. Donna, I'm gonna call on you because I was like, I know you would have something to add or comment that I certainly would have left out.
I was waiting I didn't want to overstep or interrupt somebody else. But one of the things I'll say about universal design for learning is that it's all about taking those barriers down before our students even get to them. And so I love the model of universal design for learning because it's really focused on this idea that accessibility is essential for some of our students, but it's useful for everybody. And universal design for learning is just kind of taking that whole concept of universal design, taking away barriers before we even realize it could be a barrier, by developing lessons and activities where our students can engage with content in different ways. They can also demonstrate their learning in different ways. And thinking about what some folks have posted in the chat at the beginning when they were talking about barriers, I think about that UDL lens as being some potential solutions to some of those barriers. So for example, I can't get the students to turn in their work. Okay, well then let's think about what does a virtual environment enable me to do that, to have a structure so that students can demonstrate their learning in more ways than just submitting a written response. Could they record a video? Could they record an audio? Could they do a discussion board or something? So anyway, I think universal design for learning is just such a great way to frame a lot of the work that we do with our students because it's given them multiple ways to engage with content and also to demonstrate what they've learned.
Absolutely. Yep, I would 100% agree with that. And Elizabeth, thank you for putting that in the chat. So it's a great book there on, talking about UDL. Any other thoughts, comments, questions so far? Okay. So as we start to kind of like shift this lens into thinking about strategies and tools and resources that exist in and as a part of Canvas, the first thing that I want to make sure that we talk about is the course evaluation checklist and the mobile checklist. So mobile only really applies if you are a district that uses tablets of some capacity, but really that course checklist. And each one of these images actually link out to those. So I'm going to jump out of here and into this checklist. And so if you've never heard of this before, this is a framework that Canvas created. And it essentially is a checklist of one, 2, and 3-star things when it comes to instructional design inside of Canvas. And so we're talking about that universal design here and that lens of understanding and offering multiple forms of understanding, comprehension, and demonstration of mastery. Canvas does a great job of really walking this through. And I'll just go ahead and click on the link here and I've got like 1 million copies of this document. And so the 1-star things are what they have deemed from a design perspective as fundamental things. So I, as maybe a new teacher and brand new to Canvas, I may be only focusing on those 1-star things. And so like making sure we have a homepage. And here again, right there, it tells me UDL, that is 2.5 illustrate through multiple media. It really has gone through here and aligned this document that they've created to those UDL principles so that a teacher can understand why it is important that I have those things. And then if they don't know how to do it, there's many of them here they've linked to the Canvas guides. So if you don't know how to, edit your course navigation, well, right here is a link to how to do that. Now, not all of them have that, but many of them do. And if they don't, you probably can do some keyword searching through Google and find a resource or a video that would support you in how to do X, Y, or Z. The 2 and 3-star things kind of build, so they tell you here 1 star is essential, 2-star best practices, and 3 stars are exemplary. So as teachers become more and more familiar with using Canvas and understanding why those design principles are important, it allows you to scaffold that and increase a deeper understanding of not only how to use the LMS, but how to tailor your learning environment in that digital learning environment in a way that meets those students' needs and works towards those design principles. The same thing exists for that mobile checklist. So if I go back to this, it's just more specifically about how the Canvas app is different from the student perspective. So like I said, if you're a district that uses Chromebooks or your students have laptops or whatever that may be, that may not apply to you, but I wanted to make sure that people knew that there's a difference between just the regular evaluation checklist and the mobile. The first thing that we're going to jump into as far as natively inside of Canvas is something called the accessibility checker. So what is this? Well, this is anywhere you see the rich content editor. So this is a tool that shows you some things when we talked about that universal design where, or that poor method, where maybe your content is not as robust as you may have perceived it to be. So what does those things look for? So here's a list of all the things that the accessibility checker looks for, and I'm not going to read a list to you. You're more than capable of reading this slide. So just knowing that it has that ability to look for certain things. So where does it exist? So here I am on an assignment. Anywhere you see this editor box, so this is my rich content editor where I'm putting in content and I'm manipulating a page, a header for an assignment, a header for a quiz, any of those places where you see that. And down here at the bottom is this little like person silhouette, and that is the accessibility checker. And it's going to fly out to the side here, and it's going to tell me any issues that it identifies, like I said, with that list of things that it is capable of looking for, keeping in mind it's a piece of software just like anything else. It's not perfect, but so we have that opportunity to use that tool to kind of see what that looks like. And I'm actually going to kind of demo that for you all, and you're welcome to try along with me. So what I did, you can use a page within your Canvas course, or you can use this demo page that I've created that I'm going to drop in the chat here that you could pull into your Canvas instance. And so when I open this page here, this is what it looks like. So what is the accessibility checker? And it's just a page with a bunch of information on it. It's not really relevant to any course or content, but I'm going to hit edit on this page, and we can see that I've got one, little icon here that it's upset about. As I scroll down the page here, and it's highlighted it for me and told me what it is. Well, in this particular issue, this text is not a good ratio for color. So we'll talk about color and aspect ratio. So maybe I need to make it a darker blue so it will show up for my students better, because it was originally this off gray color. Now, of course, you're not probably going to do that natively, but I'm just trying to give you an example here so you can really see. But a lot of times making sure that your students, especially students who may have color blindness, are aware of what those things are, and that you're not providing that information in a way that's not legible to them. So once it gets out of that ratio that it's okay with, you notice that apply button goes from being gray to being blue, or being clickable at this point. So once I pick a color that it meets that ratio of 3:1, I can then change that, and look, it's all happy with me, and it's so happy. And there's no other issues on this page, so I can save that. Now my text color has changed. There are lots of other ways that you could look at them. So for example, these images, do they have alt text? When you're looking at tables, does the table have all of those information that's accessible to them in a way that a screen reader could understand that? Are these headers formatted in a way where this says header 1, this is header 2, so on and so forth as you move down the page, making sure that content is there in a way for those students to understand. And so, like I said, like in this example where there are all these flags, do all these have alt text? So if a student was using something like a screen reader, that it's going to provide them the same information to know which country's flags are being represented here, as opposed to just saying image 1, image 2, image 3. That's not helpful for those students. So I really like the accessibility checker. It's available in most places inside of where you see the rich content editor. The one place where it's not currently available, I think, is like from the student's perspective. Oh wait, I'm thinking about Microsoft Immersive Reader. So it's in most places, if not all places, where you see the rich content editor. So anywhere you see this text editing box is where you're going to see that. Now, there are things it doesn't check. If you have a video, does your video have closed caption? It does not have the ability to investigate that. So not using color alone, and that's kind of what I did here in this example. I'm really using this color to introduce that introduction. That's really not a best practice there either, but the accessibility checker didn't tell me that. So those are things to consider, that it is not your safeguard for everything. So just keeping that in mind as you're building out your courses, but it is a place to start if you're not sure about how accessible your pages or content are inside of Canvas. Any questions or thoughts or comments about the accessibility checker inside of Canvas?
So Corey, I know that you're talking about the accessibility checker in Canvas, but if anybody else is using in other Office products, Microsoft Office products, it's also available in there as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. The next tool I want to talk about is the link validator. And just so everyone knows, as you go through this slide deck, if you're wanting more information, or if you're coming back to this after this presentation, I've done my best to link how-to guides for like the accessibility checker, the link validator, and as we go on down to other tools and resources as we go through this. So the link validator basically searches all of your course content, and it's going to let you know if there are any links that are broken. And like I said, this may not really fall necessarily under an accessibility tool as much as it's just a good practice for your courses when you're thinking about content over time, making sure that those links that you're going to be sending your students to actually go somewhere and they're just not broken links. So This is a tool, I think it's kind of hidden in Canvas in my opinion, but they didn't ask me. So where you go to get this is if inside of any of your courses, if you come down to the settings tab, and you probably really only ever come to the settings tab when you want to upload your image for your courses. When you come over here to the right hand side of the menu at the very bottom, you're going to see validate links in the content. This time of the year is the best time to do that. So let's say I've got my courses from last year and I've done this as an instructor. I've copied my content over into my new course for the new semester coming up. And I always go in and run the link validator to see, since the last time I've taught this course, have any of the links that are in my course, are they broken? And because, no one wants to be like, okay, we're going to be learning about, photosynthesis today, and the video that I wanted to show my kids in this module has been taken down or is no longer available. Well, they won't know that until they get there, unless I test everything ahead of time for every single module, when I'd really like to just scan my entire course at the beginning. So once I click on that, it's like start the link validator, and then it's going to run. And this is a cute little example where it's like it's got like only 2 things that are broken. Well, no, this is probably more likely something that I would end up with, where it's like, oh wow, you've got a lot of stuff. So looking at those, it's very helpful to kind of see at a surface level of looking across your course, and it kind of gives you your non-existent content reference on this content that you may want to reference. Now, you may look at this and it may be perfectly fine, and it's not broken. Like I said, like most things, it's a piece of software, but knowing that content can be scanned and searched at the beginning of a course really kind of sets you and your students up for success for the upcoming term. I'm curious to see, is anyone who's used Canvas knows about this, uses a link validator, or in the chat maybe like, this is the first time I've heard of this and I've been using Canvas for a while, or if I'm brand new, this is a brand new feature for me. So I'm curious to see thoughts, questions, and comments out there. Yeah, so yeah, like I said, sometimes people don't know that it exists, or have never had that training or opportunity to see that because it's a buried feature. It's kind of hidden in there as a gem. But I would also remind people that it's not it's not perfect, but it is going to do the best to kind of highlight those things that may exist. So I encourage you, as you're building out your new courses, or if you're copying content over from semester to semester, that you run that link validator and make sure that your courses have accessible content in those links. This is my favorite tool that exists inside of Canvas, and it's actually a third-party integration. And it's probably the only time I'll give Microsoft any props, any credit. The Microsoft Immersive Reader is a feature that is available inside of Canvas for your students to use, and really any user to use for fluency, text, and understanding of phonetics and all of those things that I never understood as a not elementary school teacher. So what exactly it is, and I'm going to go over to actually this guide tab, is that anywhere you see this button at the top that says Microsoft Immersive Reader, it allows the user to break out this page, and it has the text and the content in a way that allows them for it to be read to them, in a way for it can break down the syllables. It can do lots of other things as you're talking about making sure that students can read and comprehend the content on a page. So I'm going to go back to this page that we were looking at here for the accessibility checker, and I click on the Immersive Reader. You can see that's the same text that we were just looking at, but it's broken out in a way for me to see all types of content. And so what can I do? I can change my text preferences. So, if I have a visual impairment, I can really open up that font size. I can increase or decrease the spacing. I can pick a font that maybe helps me if I'm having trouble with identifying letters or words. I can use different colors for backgrounds, lots of different colors. That's even more than I'm used to seeing. I can turn off the formatting, so things that I have bolded or not bold, I can see the different parts of speech, which I would have loved to have had this as a kid. as a student who was not the best in English, I would have been like, oh, this was great. This would be helpful for me to know what all of these things are. So, and then even if you're breaking out the syllables and making sure that as your students are developing their fluency, that they can do that. And then you can kind of see how some reading preferences. You can choose from different languages for it to read out to that student. So here again, I think about your EL students who may need something read to them in a native language. They certainly can do that and choose those options. Like I said, this is a really, really powerful tool that is embedded inside of Canvas. The one thing that I will point out as a caveat, if you don't see it in your Canvas instance, that is something your district level or your PSU administrator has to enable. So it must be turned on at the account level for all of your users. So that's a global setting. I'm happy to have that conversation with your district admin. And it's not available in the Canvas app. It is available in the web browser version. So if you are a district or a school that uses tablets, you'd want to use it in the browser version. So whether that be Safari, Chrome, Firefox, whatever that might be, it just doesn't work in the Canvas student or parent app. And there you can see some kind of screenshots as it breaks down. Even in getting to like visual representations of what like the word material means. And so some visual representations, picture dictionary is what they call that. I'm curious to see here in the chat, is this something new to you, something you've seen before, something you, or even an example? I'd love to hear a use case about how this maybe helped a student or any of those things.
Corey, I had a session where I was talking about immersive reader. Actually, it was a Canvas session about immersive reader, and I had a foreign language teacher ask if other languages were supported, and at that time I didn't know, so I investigated. And the link that I just put in the chat shares information about the different languages that are supported. So it's great for not only our foreign language teachers or world language teachers, but also for our English learners. And Immersive Reader, like it's a third-party tool in Canvas, it's also available in some other tools that are probably pretty commonly used, like, gosh, I'm trying to think, Flipgrid. You know, it's in Flipgrid. I can't remember what else off the top of my head. So anyway, that second link there will give some more information about other places that you can use this tool.
Yeah, Wakelet was the one I was trying to think of. So thank you for putting that in the chat. Yes. So.
Well, and Wakelet, this is Brian, has discontinued the beta integration of that, which was phenomenal. I do also want to share that in Spanish, depending on the nature of your students, there is different variations of Spanish available. So there's South American, there is Spanish that is more suitable to those who come from Mexico, and then the Spanish of Spain as well. It works very well for most languages other than some of the Asian languages that are tonal in nature. Native speakers have said they feel like it's a better integration than even Google. It's a tighter translation. And it will also read to them in their native language if you switch over into that language, and it can read at different speeds. So it's great for EL and also EC students based on that if they need stuff read aloud.
Yeah, that's great to know, Brian. I did not know that about the different dialects there. That's a great point. Thank you. Leslie, your question, so the immersive reader with iPads, so no, as far as I'm aware of at this time. So what I recommend there is if they are using actually, let me back this up. If they're using the Canvas student app, it is not visible at this time. But what they could do is use the browser version. So opening it up, and this is what I worked with because the district that Brian and I came from, we used iPads. And so what I would work with my EC or ESL staff to kind of coach them and to help support their students, were to have those students logging in through Canvas through the web browser. So that would give them that button if they needed access to it. So coming in through Chrome or Safari, but not going through the app, because it currently doesn't show up inside the app at this time. But that's a great question. Any other thoughts, questions, comments around Immersive Reader? It's a great discussion. Okay, just kind of a few examples, because sometimes I think, users have the opportunity to see and experience something. It's usually a little bit better than me just talking about it. So when we talk about UDL examples inside of Canvas, this is an example of a page that would be really aligned to those principles for universal design. So we have things broken out in sections so that I can clearly see like an overview. I can see my learning targets, my expectations of what I should be doing throughout this course, and then what are the things that what are my assignments, what are my to-do list items. And you can even see here this example where they've broken out saying that the red push pins, spelling it out in text, but also using that icon to represent which one of those are those graded assignments for the students. So here this particular aligns to that 1.2, 4.2, and 7.3 to really minimize that and really speak into that 7.3 of minimizing threats and distractions. Here you can see that course navigation is really slimmed down. So here again, getting to those, removing barriers for students also sometimes just means making sure they have access to just the content that they need. And I know a lot of Canvas courses by default come across with a lot of buttons and navigations, but making sure that we tailor that down to what specifically you're using with those students so they don't get lost. I mean, that is just a best practice there, having the content that's relevant to in front of them. But using things like images and icons, and even with the new icon editor that's out in Canvas now, and the rich content editor is something that I would recommend. It's gotten a lot easier to put things in there, but using something as simple as emojis or those text headers or horizontal lines to break up that content. When I'm thinking about assignments and quizzes and discussions, here again, those same principles copy over from a page or a discussion. So making sure that we've broken out our content and we're using different ways to visually break up the content, so it's not just a stream of HTML text at 12-point font and nothing's bolded, but making sure that we're using things like those images, the header classifications, the horizontal divides, breaking words apart, spelling things out so that our students can see those things, and highlight those goals and objectives. So talking about what is our objective for this, what is the assignment overview, how will you be graded, and how do I get support, putting those things through. Questions on either of those things? So what do those exemplar examples look like? How can I get a hold of them? So if you're not familiar with Canvas Commons, those are great resources to search for content that's already created. And I think a lot of people get overwhelmed that Canvas sometimes maybe feel like it needs some sort of expertise in HTML programming, but you can really find a lot of content that exists out there. You can pull into your courses and utilize them. Any questions, comments? Okay, so the last thing I'm going to leave you with today are some 5 best practices, and these kind of are just in no particular order, but just some things that I would recommend as you think about developing your courses and we start the school year. Setting up color contrast. This is kind of thing when we looked at the accessibility checker inside of a page, making sure that your colors are not all over the place. So making sure that each one of these examples kind of gives you good and bad things about them, making sure that there's balance in between those things, taking into effect that some people, now have dark mode inside of their devices. So what does that may look like if they're leveraging dark mode? not only just out of preference, but maybe for an accessibility reason, they need that content. And then that color contrast is set up in a way so it doesn't, I don't know, this bottom example just kind of makes my eyes hurt in a general way, just even looking at it. So making sure that you keep those things in mind as we talk about color contrast. We also don't want it to be like every color under the sun and you feel like you've taken a highlighter to the page in a way that's just like everything is highlighted now, so I don't know what's important at all. So using that balance. And I'm going to put Brian on the spot because he actually shared this resource with me this morning about this color palette builder. So Brian, I'm going to tab over to this, but I would turn it over to you to say how you found this resource and how you've used it, or maybe how it's beneficial.
Yes, it came in an email this morning and I looked at it, and what I appreciate is two things. One, I'm not a good color combination person in general. And so I can go in and choose the color that I want, and it'll give me suitable palettes, and it gives me the HTML names as well. So I appreciate that. But then it's also going to help me understand the accessibility, since I don't necessarily have an awareness of all those considerations. I love it that when you choose one color, it basically chooses palettes that fall in there. So I think this is a great useful tool for you to kind of have a little bit of color and inspiration, but still serve your students through accessibility.
Awesome. Thank you. If you all have other tools and resources, you are welcome to drop them in the chat. I love learning things like this because I live in the world of using these HTML codes for those colors. So having tools out there, that I agree with Brian, sometimes you need something to be like, hey, I need a complementary color that's going to go with this. So those are great resources. And this is kind of, there's a whole article here about the psychology of color that if you love to read academic articles or just blogs and posts like that, I strongly recommend taking a look at that so that you can kind of just learn about that as well. Adding image alt text. So Canvas has gotten really good about this to where the accessibility checker is going to pull this for you when you are uploading an image to say, hey, this image does not have alt text. So alt text is simply just a few snippets of words to basically tell a user what is going on in that image. And I would love to say that you could write paragraphs at length describing what's going on in that picture. But you really kind of have to limit and narrow it down because every system is a little different. I know that even some instances it's down to like just a 120 characters kind of thing, like a tweet's worth of information. So being as succinct as you can, but still trying to convey a message, it gives you this alt text box here to ensure that if someone is using a screen reader or just mouses over that image, it's going to kind of give them like I said, that snippet of information that's going on. And even thanks to some training with Donna, she's talked about how that social media and aspects like Twitter have now allowed for alt text to be added when you're even posting something. The one option to that, and the exception is this checkbox that says decorative image. You could just, if that was like if I'm going back to my example here with this page, this star, if that's an image that I put in there, I could use the alt text that says star for learning targets, or I could check the box that says decorative image because it's just providing a visual aid as a reference to break up that section. That screen reader still is going to tell them that the heading says learning targets, and really kind of accomplishes the same thing. So keeping that in mind as you're importing your images into your courses and making sure that icons are marked as those decorative images. Using your heading style. So I've alluded to this a couple times. When you're in that rich content editor, making sure that you just don't highlight that text and make it font size 32. That if it's a header, that you actually give it the header notation, because like I said, as those screen readers go down the page, that's how it knows to categorize different sections of a page or a text or content. And then making sure that you're not jumping back and forth. It really should follow a sequence. So you don't want to go heading 1 to heading 4. It should go through a progression of heading 1 down to heading 2. And you can jump in between the neighboring ones. I could go from heading 2 to heading 3, but you don't want to ever skip multiple headings. So I wouldn't want to have an example where I go from all the way from heading 2 all the way down to heading 4 or paragraph. So using those dividers as well. Audio video, making sure that you have things that have the ability for closed captioning. YouTube has obviously made this very easy for you nowadays as you upload a video to auto transcribe your videos and content to have those closed captions available. If you use Canvas Studio inside of your PSU, that also works natively inside of Canvas when you upload those MP4 files, but making sure that you have that content available. If you want to know how to use those things, there are links here about how to upload a video and include closed captioning and how to use Canvas Studio, and making sure that they have that. So like I said, because sometimes that's even helpful if you don't have your headphones and you're in a place where you just want to read the transcript for that video, you may not have that opportunity. So there's my 5 tips for you, and this is kind of what I have as accessibility inside of Canvas and understanding UDL and that framework. I'm happy to open this up for questions, and thank you guys for hanging out with me today. Thank you. I hope you guys have a great day. All right, anybody still left on the call have any questions, thoughts, or comments? I'm happy to stick around here, but I don't want to close you out.